Well, golly gee.
We were already listening.
Well, what I want to go over today is what we started at the end of last week, which was the discussion about what is a point. And as I've thought about it during the week, I realized that a lot of the confused and merely wrong-headedness about Chinese medicine in this country can not only just be illustrated by the notion of point, but kind of depends upon the misunderstandings about point. You know, let's start by considering what is a point. As a common English word, I don't know if I'm unique or rare in this regard, but it's very hard for me to even think the word without invoking its mathematical dimension. To me, yeah, I realize that point has a lot of non-technical, non-mathematical meanings, but that mathematical presence is always sort of a cloud around all of its various other meanings. So even when I think of it in a phrase like points of interest.
You think of a map with little dots or something.
I think of that notion of what is its mathematical meaning? Dimensionless. This has always intrigued me. Because if it's dimensionless, what relationship does it have with reality? There's no, like, come with me to the dimensionless space. There's no through road. So, the notion of point is inextricably linked with the whole notion of quantification and abstraction and a way of relating to the patterns of the natural world that's expressed in mathematics. First thing to recognize about the contrast between the Chinese term which gets translated as point and the English term point is that that is simply not true in the Chinese word.
What is the Chinese word?
Well, there's a couple of different Chinese terms. The most basic term for point is shui.
And that has like the cave symbol in it? Is that the one?
Shui means cave. That's shui. The components of shui, the top part, the dot and the hood, is a part of characters that means dwelling. It refers to an enclosure for living in. The bottom part is a word that means two somewhat distinct things. One is the number 8, and one is the notion of divide. So, probably it's correct to think of its spreading, dividing, a reference to shape. And you join that philologically with dwelling, and what you get is a division, an opening that you can live in. It's the word that means cave. Some of its etymological baggage is important to understand what cloud surrounds the Chinese word. If the English word is surrounded by the cloud of mathematics, what cloud surrounds the Chinese term? And it's a mythological cloud, because not only did ancient Chinese people live in caves, but some of their mythical creatures lived in caves. Most significantly, one whose name is a homonym with wind, Feng, the phoenix. The phoenix is a potent mythological image. It's the embodiment of regeneration, renaissance. And of course, it's closely associated with the wind because it lives in the wind. And have you spent much time in caves?
Some.
Well, one of the things you notice, particularly at the mouths of caves, is wind. Air flows out, air flows in. If you take a relatively simple perspective on the experience of caves, it's not difficult to grasp how to early humans, they appeared to be places where earth and sky met, interchanged, exchanged, breathed. And, probably on many more than one occasion, observers could see various kinds of flying animals going into and coming out of caves. So what we understand as cave is a dwelling place of vital force. Qi. Now we can talk more about that and its implications, but I went on a little bit of length just to emphasize how different that kind of reading of the etymological origins of shui compares to point. So I have three questions that for years served for me as the basis for a kind of intake interview for potential teachers. What I always wanted to know from my teachers was, what is qi? What is yin and yang? What is the point? If people will share with you their understanding of these three terms, you can do some sort of assessment of where they're at on the subject of Chinese medicine. So,
Well, it couldn't be that a bigger difference between English and European idea of a point and the Chinese.
I mean, nothing of that comes up when you think of point. That nothing like opening space, living in, like you live in a point. None of those concepts come through with that word, I feel like.
they don't tend to. They have to be associated with it. Now there's another term for point in Chinese, which is shu. It's a fairly complicated character. I won't bother you with it at the moment, but you can look it up. It's probably in the text. It's a point. Sorry, it's a word that means something like transportation or communication.
What's your opinion?
SHU. And usually, when that term is used, it's used in combination with shui, shu shui. The other phrase that you hear to refer to points in Chinese is shui wei, or wei, the second term, means location. But clearly what's being described in the Chinese term is something that has to do with living, something that has to do with an almost morphological feature. You think this is a term that's talking not about features of the landscape, but the landscape in question is the landscape of the flesh. So it speaks to openings in the flesh. I think one of the points I made last week when we first started in on this topic was part of the brief indoctrination that I give patients before I work on them is that I'm going to concern myself with two main kinds of features of their body. And they're the same functional thing, but at two different orders of magnitude. At the macro level, we've got joints. What joints give us are moments of emptiness that facilitate the movement of the macro body. And all you have to do is imagine the macro body without its joints to understand how it's these moments of emptiness which permit the movement. Life depends for its survival upon movement. No movement, no survival. No movement, no life. At the micro level, we've got these structures which we very unfortunately call points. But they're not points. They're caves which you can see in the shape of the cave depends upon emptiness. The difference between the cave and the surrounding mountain is the cave is the part where nothing is there. Nothing, that's the key. Okay, so what do we do with these structures? What is our therapeutic aim? One of the biases or prejudices of the approach that I take to body work is that the generic description of what goes wrong with bodies is accumulation. I'm keenly aware that this is not the description of everything that goes wrong with the body, yet it is applicable to much that goes wrong with the body. We accumulate and we do not slough off. We do not expel. When this accumulation affects our joints, movement becomes difficult, restricted, and painful. When this condition affects our blood vessels, we've got a whole range of vascular diseases. In Western medical terms, they're often associated with depository illness and inflammatory processes. But the accumulation in the domain of the blood basically has the result of limiting the circulation of blood, restricting the flow.
Clarify for me the role of inflammation in that.
My understanding of a process illustrated by what's known vernacularly as hardening of the arteries is that the body's immune response includes heating things up. And this heat can damage tissue, cause micro fissures in tissue, which further invokes immune-like responses to put out the fire and fix the damage. The plaque that builds up in arteries is today's solution to yesterday's problem. The body does lots of things which are kind of stupid, and kind of inappropriate to our actual situation. probably at some point in evolution we retained much more of the reptilian capacity to regenerate limbs. If reptiles get attacked in one of their digital limbs, their body basically, even if it hasn't been bitten off, their body will just clamp down, kill that part, and let it fall away because they can grow another one. Well, we have the same response to trauma. Often the body tries to close down, restrict the blood flow, and let the affected part shrivel and die. That may not be the best approach to saving it. And the body does this ignorant of the fact that it no longer possesses the capacity to grow a new one. But it retains that set or that pattern of responses which is meant to destroy the old one, to get rid of the old one.
Am I right in thinking that the liver can kind of regrow? Is that A, true, and how does it fit into what you're saying, if at all?
Many things in many types of tissue in the body we still possess the capacity to regrow. But, in some parts where we now don't have it, we maybe once did. That's the point I was making about that. But does that clarify for you what I was talking about? So, what we're trying to deal with often in clinic is this accumulation which has taken place. The generic description of the solution to accumulation is take out the trash. In Taiji we say attract to emptiness. How do you get a flow going? Empty below it. This is the notion of attract to emptiness.
And below, in this context, means?
The Jinglo map shows a pattern of flow, a pattern of regulation. Bearing in mind that the system that it describes is not like water running down a mountain through a river eventually to the sea, unless your view of that system includes the whole hydrological cycle, and you're aware that the water that evaporates out of the sea forms rain which falls upstream and of course near the bore, near the place where the river and the sea unite, there's the capacity for the flow going the other way. The Jinglo system is that type of system. So we can't always know with certainty what is at this moment downstream of what, short of observing. the system of regulation that's described in Jing Law suggests that the internal organs all communicate with each other, but in, for lack of a better word, a kind of disciplined way, a patterned way.
Based on the five phase understanding.
Yes. So what we're trying to do with points and joints is restore, rehabilitate, and support the emptiness. This therapeutic strategy is made possible by the understanding of points as caves. Does all that make sense? Oh yeah, the character for sure is in your notes. I'm looking right at it. So what points are features of a map. The map we call Jinglo.
Could you repeat that word for the map?
Jinglo.
Oh, Jinglo, okay.
Jinglo is an artifact of the attempt to map the body using yin and yang. This map starts with a very fundamental awareness. There are parts of the body where yang is emphasized, and there are parts of the body where yin is emphasized. Illustration. Take the arm. We think of the hair growing part of the arm, and in some of us hairy critters, you notice that the hair growing part and the non-hair growing part have both grown hair. But what we call the back of the hand or the back of the arm is the yang surface. And what we call the palm or the palmar aspect of the arm and hand is the yin surface. So this is what I mean when I say it's an attempt to map the body using yin and yang. The body is further broken down into 3 degrees of yin and 3 degrees of yang. In other words, the most yang, the middle yang, and the least yang. The most yin, the middle yin, and the least yin. In that approach at mapping is where we find points. The points connect the map. As the joints connect the map that we call the skeleton, the points connect the map that we call Jinglo. And as the joints give us the capacity to intervene with musculoskeletal issues, the points give us the capacity to intervene at what we think of as chi issues. How does the Jinglo regulate the body? By regulating the movement of chi. What you see on the Jinglo map is a representation of the regular pattern of circulation of chi throughout the body. It serves to connect all the distal regions of the body and to bring them into communication with the interior of the body. When you have a chance to look at the outline, you find some additional information. What I'd like to focus on is bringing to your experienced reality this awareness of the map of the body in terms of yin yang and points. And I think the best way to do that is tactily. In the hands-on tactical mode. And that's really all this is here to do.
Also like different temperatures.
Sure. I got two sides.
Just out of curiosity.
And then I noticed too, as the person, like, you feel differently, like the different surfaces, like, have different sensitivities. Like, did you ever do that experiment where you close your eyes and you have someone hold like two different points, and then you're supposed to tell them when it's one point?
Mm-hmm.
And like you can do it way better on different surfaces,
Yeah.
depending on where the location is.
Proprioception.
Yeah.
For me, it felt like the yang surfaces, I could feel more on the surface, like just more out on the surface, and then yin, I could kind of like press a little bit into to feel.
I guess a big part of what this kind of work is meant to accomplish is the validation of the hands as sources of information.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately what guides us in the clinic is not our knowledge of the foods, but the information that we get directly from the patient.
Yeah.
And on the leg, it's yang is the outside and yin is the inside. No, this is plain.
Actual experience of having a body? Or is it a complete arbitrary assignment of significance to the flesh? I want you each to use this method of not referring to classical locations or points, but just find 5 places that you somehow determined to be points. After that, then I'm going to give you several locations, and you're going to find those points. Clear? You don't have to work one at a time. You can all have at it at once. And I'll just pay attention to you one at a time because that's as multitasking as I can be.
Trying to go somewhere where I don't really know points very well.
You know, you notice when you palpate the flesh that there's several things that you're actually touching. You're always touching skin. Sometimes you're touching muscles. Sometimes you're touching ligaments or other kinds of connective tissue. Sometimes
We are trying to find points, and it's harder if you know points. So it was like trying to go somewhere where I hadn't really gone, but just like trying to find a point without knowing.
this would be the most difficult for poor Roxana
I know.
because she knows all of them.
It's interesting how some points are more of a cave, kind of more of an obvious cave.
Yeah. Some like don't really even feel cave-like at all.
Are they supposed to feel cave-like?
Well, I was just thinking like in the joints.
Well,
like,
a lot of them
you
are.
sort of
like
fall into a
GB41,
place.
you're like,
or something. Yeah.
it's like such a cave there. GB40. Sorry.
There's a couple of different Okay, let's shift to the one at a time mode. And here are the points I want you to find. First one is kidney 1 on trend. The next one is GB40. We'll talk about the locations as needed. The next one is stomach 36. Then,
Susan.
the next one is Hagu. The next one is Chihai. And the next one is Baihui. Is that 6?
Which one's Chi, right?
CV6.
Run 6.
Pardon me? Which is,
Run 6?
okay.
1.5 symbol. Looks like.
Four fingers below this feature that we call the calves line, the outer calves line. In the high point of this muscle that lies along the tibia. What's the name of this muscle? I think that's right. And then Hagu. Then Chihai, the C of Chi. 3 fingers below the navel. And Baihui, the head top. Mine is conveniently marked with a scab. Okay, take it away. So it differs from point to point. May not be completely different at every point, but the approach relates to that specific point. At GB40, because we're dealing with this very pronounced shape, the direction has to be into that opening. So for instance, if you're at GB40 and your direction is down towards the sole of the foot, you miss the point. You have to be upward and inward into the ankle joint. I learned this lesson in Chengdu one day. I was working in the acupuncture inpatient ward, and I was needling patients with my supervisor, a woman doctor named Lee. And I put in some point, maybe stomach 36, and the doctor came over and asked the patient, what did they feel? The patient said, it feels fine. The doctor said, no, tell me what you feel. And the patient said, well, I really didn't feel much of anything. And then she backed my needle out until it was almost out, changed the angle of insertion by about 3 degrees, and put it back in, at which point the patient noticeably felt something. Then I realized, there's angle. Well, there's angle when you're using your hands as well as when you use the needles. So you have to, in finding points, you have to be concerned not just with the location in terms of the surface anatomy, but with direction, meaning where are you going when you press into that point.
Is it the same for needles and twine needles? I guess the needles would be more specific, but just in general, is it the same?
more pointed.
Yeah. Like for GB40, would you needle that going up towards the ankle?
I
I think
do.
that's what he's saying, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because that's probably how the needle also fits into that anatomical location.
You don't want the tip of your needle and the bone to be occupying the same space at the same time.
So, am I getting closer to it than I was?
Here's a practical matter for finding and using BB40s.
Mm-hmm.
It's best to
Hold the
have
foot.
the ankle in this position,
Aha,
Yeah.
okay.
and it's best to use your thumb so that you're holding this way. Hold my, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, coach me.
Yeah, I would use the other hand.
Oh, okay.
Here.
Okay, good.
This is kind of UV channel.
Okay,
You just feel around, like come
Mhm.
around and just kind of feel where your
okay.
hand. Does that feel more GB40?
That feels so much like BB40s.
And maybe this is a good point for him. That's why you keep going there. You never know.
Is that a good point for you?
Well,
Okay. I think that answers it. Okay, so ST36.
let's just say I've had that point my whole life.
And again, I'm willing to take
You
coaching
can
on
put
this
it,
if I'm
the
not.
leg down now. I would
Okay.
probably put the leg back down.
Okay. So
You find
the
the
calf side,
calf
yeah.
side, and then 4 fingers down from that. one.
Okay.
So kind of on the mound of the muscle.
I'm willing to take feedback on this.
Looks like it's probably right.
Okay, good.
Feedback.
Thank you, Ken. Okay.
This one too is best done this way.
Which one? Oh, okay.
So I hold the
Mm-hmm.
ulnar side of the hand in my fingers and press
okay.
on the radial side with my
Makes sense. Sort of like a handshake.
I'm a little lost again.
Outside
Uh,
handshake.
I'm having so much pain in my right thumb that I can't really press with it. I'm going to have to do it with the left thumb.
Oh, okay.
So,
sometimes with Hagu you can feel even like a
Even with
little
my left
grainy
hand, I
something.
think I would hold it like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the angle is towards the hand rather than the thumb.
Yeah, down.
You know, I've always recognized that there's different purposes that you can use different points for in your hand.
Oh yeah, you can push it back up towards the wrist too.
Yeah,
It's a
so
totally different feeling.
this is one kind of feeling. This
Oh,
is a
yeah,
different kind
yeah.
of feeling.
Yeah.
This goes up the channel more, and this goes across the hand more.
And the one you're looking for is the up the channel or both?
Depends on what you're trying to do. But that's just a good point to illustrate that particular
Yeah.
point. And the same holds for needling. Sometimes when I needle this point, I will needle this way. And sometimes I will needle this way.
Ah.
Shall I go on?
Yes.
Okay, so have I more or less got the Hegu here?
Got it.
Okay, so I want the C of G.
Good.
Okay. Right way.
Byway is a funny point, you know.
Meaning?
It makes me laugh. It's a point that always feels like it's not where it's supposed to be. That feels like byway to me.
Okay.
Next.
Yeah, you also do.
Is there a subtle difference between Yang Chuan and the bubbling spring?
The next one is the angle.
Like a little bit, bubbling spring a
And
little
this
bit
one,
further
what is the target?
down?
Oh, that's
Or
right.
is it the same?
There's no difference between young tree and bubbling spring.
That's what I thought. thought at first, but then at one point I got confused and thought that it was like slightly different.
Young Chinese, the one you That's right, spot on.
Hmm. That one. What was the next one? And that was. Oh, through here.
So you find
Oh, I remember now.
This
Yeah, the
cabinet.
yeah, and then it was 4
and
fingers
this from
below.
the outside one.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. Then it's the stomach.
Shanghai.
Or Hegu, I don't know if you're on order, it doesn't matter really.
Don't press too viciously.
That's awfully sweet of you.
Is that anywhere near the right place?
Where's it? I want to find the umbilicus.
And then it's four fingers.
No, it's
3 fingers.
Yeah.
Okay, so with fingers or
I thought it was 1.5. So down.
Well, 2 fingers is 1 trim. No?
no, this isn't right or this is
No, I'm.
Oh.
I've always thought that it was 1.5 trim was 3 fingers.
Oh.
Do you have a different idea?
No, I don't know anything.
She's like, just everything in my brain.
I
What's the
always
right place?
did
Oh, that's
That
good.
one
the
is
Ren
one finger.
channel like this,
And now the next one
breaking
is
to
the hip one.
5, and then
And so this is one.
Can I fold your ears?
this
Or no.
one's 7, and it's between these 2 fingers.
I don't want to press right on your scab.
Oh, my scab. I'm ready to rip it off. It's so itchy.
Oh, well, I'm not going to assist you with that part of it.
I mean, don't worry about hurting me.
Okay. Am I too far back here? Or?
That's right.
Yeah. Ah.
Okay, next. This is the part for raising the bed.
Bringing them back to the earth.
Yeah.
Are you pressing straight in, Mackenzie, or at an angle?
I don't know. I think I am. I think you could go a little bit up, but I'm not sure what the angle is supposed to be technically on this one. Anybody?
Towards the head top.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. Just up.
long do you press each point for? Is there a...
It's a whole class in itself.
That's what I was afraid of.
It's a really important question, and I feel like it's one that you're always answering, like for every appointment, for every person. For some reason, like stomach 36 is always so weird. Like sometimes I just feel like I get it,
Always
and
so.
other times I don't.
Yeah.
Did I get that, Ken? Does that feel like it?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess Ken could answer your time question. How long to hold a point?
Depends on the patient, right?
Yeah, it
It
just
depends on the point.
every situation.
Because you said you had that one patient that you held the point for like over 20 minutes and we're getting all those changes.
Yeah, the answer comes from what are you trying to do?
Mm-hmm. Like in general, stomach 36 is less time because you're not really draining, you're like stimulating or something.
Now that feels too posterior to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
That seems better.
Or even more.
Yeah.
Is that kidney one?
That's it. We found it.
Pretty set to go. That's stomach 36. Does that feel like a Bai-Hui?
That feels like by way. Now,
Oh, I forgot that one. Shihai. So I would find Shihai like right here. Does that seem too high? This is a good one for you.
That's higher than the fingers.
I would find it here.
Let's see. Is that where I had it?
I think so.
You kind of fall into it. What? No, this is
Excellent. Never to return.
Okay, now I want to do one more thing with this, which is have each of you get up here. I'm going to find
Hands and the person's foot, and she got such small little feet.
What's that saying in between that? If it fits, use it or something.
what?
Like it's like I don't remember. It's like when you're like doing technique. It's like what you're doing if it fits into the situation. Like you. Sort of
Like the concept you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know the words though.
Yeah.
Like specifically, it makes me think about this the step forward point, where like you can step back,
Yeah.
or you can like wherever you need to go
Yeah.
is actually where you're supposed to step.
Yeah, I think like in terms of like when you're finding areas that you're massaging
Yeah.
or something, like
If it feels right.
there's all
Yeah.
these different tools you can use your body to do it, but if it fits, you can use it for that.
Somebody want to trail that along? That'd be great. Thank you.
It's like really unclear what was happening.
We're learning.
It's like a baby.
What?
It's like an IV. It's like an IV. So are you pressing with both thumbs?
No. Okay, next victim.